Greetings, everyone, and welcome to TRG 30. I'm Jill Robinson, TRG's CEO, and today, for our special edition of TRG 30, we are talking about UK City of Culture in Coventry with leaders from that community. Today, I'm going to be joined by Professor Martin Reeves, who is the Chief Executive of Coventry City Council and also the chair of the executive board of the Coventry City of Culture Trust, which you'll hear about here in a moment. And also Martin Sutherland. The two Martins have joined me today. Martin is the chief executive of Coventry City of Culture Trust. They're going to join me in just a minute. But as Stephen has reminded you today, keep chat open, add your comments and narrative to the discussion, and remember to ensure those comments go to everyone and not just panelists. There'll be time for Q&A at the bottom of the hour so that we can talk with these gentlemen and me today about the extraordinary year in Coventry of 2021. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to be thinking about a few specific things. First, new realities in your community. Has your creative community come together differently since the pandemic began? Have you observed new conversations, new relationships as you reflect on them? And are some of those starting energy that you want to maintain and grow as you look to the next 5 or 10 years? And then today you're going to hear the two Martins talk about shared motivations of a city and a region with a creative community and an arts and cultural community. Where do those shared motivations exist in your community? And how might you have, in fact, is there one conversation that as you listen to them talk with me, you might be inspired to initiate or continue that might galvanize and inspire your community to think about the power of arts and culture to reinforce resiliency for the long term. Okay, so before I begin, before I bring on the two Martins with me here, I want to provide a bit of orientation. Today, we're going to be telling a story of a community in England, as they call it, West Midlands in England, named Coventry. And in 2017, Coventry successfully bid for and won the prestigious title of UK City of Culture. It's a designation given to a city in the UK for a period of 1 calendar year. Coventry's bid was for the year 2021. And during this time, the successful bidder hosts cultural and creative activities and programs designed to create community benefit for the year and for the longer term. This is administered, this program, by the UK government through their Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, DCMS, in collaboration with governments in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The history is tied to a similar program in Europe, but there are surprises for you who are in attendance here. There are reasons why this project and the way it works can, and I believe should, affect communities outside the context of a formal designation like UK City of Culture. Could affect any group of people in any community who want to use and lift the creative economy as a galvanizer for long-term resiliency. So hang with me and us as we tell this story. Okay, so Coventry wins the bid in 2017, driven by the city itself. And Martin Reeves brings that perspective because he's been the city council's chief exec for more than a dozen years. Immediately, Coventry City of Culture Trust was created to administer this program, City of Culture, and Martin Sutherland was a successful arts executive. He was successfully recruited to be the chief executive for the trust and make all of the intentions happen. So Boy, oh boy, welcome to the two of you. I am so pleased that you could join me and us today. Thank you for making the time. I'll love for you to come off of mute and into this room from Coventry in England. It's so nice to see both of your faces today. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks, Jill. You're very welcome.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yes, and before I take us off share and just go into a dialogue, I want to frame up a few important aspects of Coventry's City of Culture. And I want to start with this, the vision. Martin Reeves, this vision was part of the initial plan, the initial bid. Tell us about why Coventry bid for City of Culture, why it was important and exciting for Coventry.
Yeah, thanks, Jill, and I hope everyone's well. So you've kind of framed it well. The UK City of Culture is a designation, both the build-up, the year itself, and the legacy, clearly in of itself important, prestigious. So the city didn't have a history in the past of being confident enough to bid for such prestigious awards. I always called us the kind of cellophane city, in the sense that we were looked through, we were looked over, and we always felt like we didn't have the asset base, not just in culture, but across a number of our other areas of assets and delivery. So for us, right from the beginning, when the genesis of should we bid, it was so much more than just a designation. It was a determination that the most likely outcome was that we wouldn't win. That's just the nature of the competition. So actually, how do we build a coalition, a collaboration based around the power of culture and communities to say that actually, win, lose, and we definitely knew we wouldn't draw, we knew we'd either win or lose. How do we keep that momentum going? And this is the bit, right from the beginning, it says there around that change dynamic. How do we convince ourselves and everybody else that actually culture, identity, arts, and the bringing together of people will not be peripheral to the future transformation of our great city, it will be core. And that's what we decided as our defining mission. And the fact that we won was an incredible bonus, and we'll hear more about that later, but it was profound in our thinking right from the beginning.
Well, okay, so you had a destination in mind, whether or not you won the bid. So people listening, whether or not the decision by the City Council in Coventry was arts and culture is going to be a powerful force for systemic change in this city called Coventry. And Martin Reeves, you've talked to me about things that you describe in a report. Stephen, if you don't mind putting the City of Culture's recently published interim report so that everyone here can get access to it. But in there, you describe theories of change, stories of change, measurement, really detailed measurement along the way, and years after 2021 to measure impact. And there was a framework, a destination for output that is described there. These are things that you as a city intended to have arts and culture transform.
So great cities around the UK, Europe, North America, Asia, the world have got one thing in common, the great cities, is that they understand that people's lives and how we focus on improving the livability of our residents, visitors, is based on a beautiful combination of hearts and minds. What I always knew was that in the heart of knowing that actually investment in arts, culture, not stepping back at a time when the UK government was restricting funding into local government and my city, but actually to step forward and win in the hearts of people saying this is going to change our lives for positive. It wasn't easy, but it was relatively easy compared with the mind of cerebrally saying this has got a metric, it's got an output, an outcome that will shift the economic dial. And the reason that's really important, and I'm an economist, but I love culture, the power, I always have done. But the reason that's important is you can't have the same trick for every single folk. There are times when that heart stuff will win the argument. Most of the time, though, you've got stakeholders, politicians, decision makers, funders who will have to go with a clarity of thought which says, by investing here, we will deliver this economic social return which is tangible. The trick, though, is to never accentuate one over the other, because the power of human stories, the power of the heart in our great cities is what makes us different from other cities. But at the same time, we said right from the beginning, We will be clear about what the investment, both for the bidding and for the long-term delivery of cultural regeneration in our city, will be understood economically, socially, from the eyes of residents, visitors, government, and everybody that cares about our city. And I absolutely delighted that we stuck with that discipline, and you'll hear from Martin and others. We've kept that theory of change, that strong evidence base, not to the detriment of the power of human stories, but in addition to. And I think that's going to stand us in good stead for future investment as well.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the words on this page, right? So the performance measurement was around two major areas, as I read: participation engagement in a variety of ways with a variety of different people behind this data, and economics, skills, and place. Again, variety of ways, variety of people behind the data. So Martin Sutherland, you were hired to make all of this intention happen. It was really interesting to hear the two of you talk. I thought about Olympics, which, you know, this is the season we're in now. This is a little bit of a cultural Olympics, and a community says, yes, we want to win this bid. And these are the things we intend on making happen, but then it has to happen. So you had to do that. And in the context of a global pandemic, there are a couple of types of outcomes that this interim report describes. And I just want to click through. This first row describes the impact on people. 1,500 artists engaged. A third of the programs co-created. Now think about those of you in this room who are thinking about how do we co-create with artists in our community. That was done in neighborhoods with people. Difficult, beautiful work. 42 neighborhoods all engaged. More than 40% of tickets and admissions given to people who faced financial insecurity. And then, you know, the numbers. 173 million pounds invested in, £500 million of regeneration in terms of the economy, direct granting from the trust to the community, and almost 200,000 admissions during a global pandemic. So there is so much here, right, in terms of the outputs. But Martin Sutherland, if you would just take the mic here, and if I'm someone in this room and I think about a city of culture designation and I see these numbers and I hear Martin Reeves talk about the intention, I probably make assumptions about what comes with that designation. So can you help us understand what the designation is and what it isn't, what you and Martin and other partners had to create yourselves during that planning period?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I guess the designation, to maybe myth bust, doesn't come with a big cash prize. It doesn't come with guaranteed central government investment. It doesn't come with a travelling team who've been experienced in other cities. But also, rather brilliantly, it doesn't come with a set of rules, regulations, or a blueprint. So what it does give the city is a flexibility to adapt the title, the spotlight moment, to deliver the change that the city has determined for itself. And so what it doesn't come is laden with expectations from the government about replicating what has come before. So the programme is inspired by the European Capital Culture Programme, but it had been wrong for our city to replicate what Hull achieved, which is the previous UK City Culture. In the same way, they didn't replicate what happened in Londonderry, they didn't replicate what happened in Liverpool or Glasgow prior to that. So what it comes with is a freedom to adapt or use the title to make the change that you wish to make in your city. And the cities who get it right are the ones who make long-lasting change. And I remain sceptical about the power of these projects in terms of long-term impact. Most legacy programs are vague at best, a bit buzzwordy, disappointing, and we've endeavoured not to fall into that trap. So Martin and the team established this long-term change program, and my job has been to accelerate some of those ambitions through deploying our resources appropriately. So what it comes with is pressure, a change program, but it comes with an enormous amount of flexibility as well. The team have had to work hard. Obviously, we've delivered this in a pandemic. We have raised all of that money for revenue funding from the trust perspective, but worked with the City Council in particular and the Combined Authority, who've just done an amazing job in terms of unlocking the capital potential from this title as well. And so the city looks different. I mean, it's totally transformed as a public realm space. The cultural infrastructure has been massively upgraded. That is not as a result of my team's work, it's a result of this designation. But then our job is to make sure that those who can access those facilities, that we change the nature of how those facilities are used and who has longer term control over them. So our job is about influencing the long-term usage of those cultural spaces, but the City Council and the Combined Authority have done a just extraordinary job of transforming the city. So it comes with freedom, but it comes with restrictions. But it's a gift to the city. But it doesn't have to be only done. The change doesn't only have to be done as a result of these designations. I guess is my message here. Is that it needs leadership from a city. It needs city elected officials and critically people like Martin who are going to value culture as a change mechanism. And so it is possible in every realm, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. So both of you, let's go back to the beginning, kind of. Martin Reeves, you said, I believe in the power of arts and culture to enliven and improve. How hard was that? How did you convince a city that that was the right decision? And who then, Martin Sutherland, as you go back to the beginning, whom did you partner with first to create the right kind of momentum to make all of these extraordinary numbers and impacts happen?
Yeah, just on the first bit about, I'll be honest, and I've said this to Martin and colleagues as they arrived in the city, politically, and our political administrations are different to those across certainly North America, Europe and elsewhere, but in terms of our body of 54 local elected councillors, and particularly our cabinet and our ruling Labour administration, they were unbelievable. Because I approached them at a point of the deepest austerity budget cuts in local government history in the UK. At the time where we had some of the highest demands on our services and some of the most challenging external environment in the UK ever. And I said to them, will you back me and us as a city to say this is our time to bid for something that we're highly unlikely to win? And at the same time, I believe that in order to bid for that successfully, we should create an independent trust and let go and cede control, right? Biggest thing about politicians I've learned over my 20 odd years in public services, number one is, money is hard-earned taxpayers' money, so be careful with that and get it right. But number two, ceding power, letting go is not easy for politicians at a local or national, international level. Do you know what? They just looked at me and said, let's do it. And they never looked back. So the power of that, and I think in fact, I know the reason why was twofold. Number one is it wasn't just, as we said, about arts and culture for the sake of it. It was a natural part of how we wanted to reimagine and redefine our city, which they love and we love for the next 20, 30, 50, 100 years, number one. But number two, they put their money where their mouth is, because despite those tough political choices, we didn't defund arts and culture. We didn't, and I'm not knocking other UK cities who did. We just made the political decision, backed by officers and partners, that we would, far from recede and withdraw from culture funding, we accelerated our funding and kept it where we could the same. So actually there was already a vested interest in let's not lose that collateral and that capital that we've worked hard for. So I'm not going to be on this call and say it was so difficult. The difficult thing then was to do what we've already discussed with you. How do you then keep that guiding coalition across a wider area, which is probably more cynical, more skeptical, maybe not as bought in? And that's, clearly something that Martin inherited, because we'd taken people to the top of a hill, right? And then we appoint him and Shaneen Bathina and say, right, go over the top.
Yeah, right, exactly. So Martin, where'd you start? I mean, where does one start?
I mean, in some ways, yes, we're taking the top of the hill, but I guess what Martin and the team have done is they've built a whole series of people who are ready to go over the top with us, really. And but also what we did was, I guess, build a coalition, I guess, of maybe unexpected partners. So from the outset, we were determined that we were going to use this designation to I guess, make access to culture more fairly distributed across the city, but also as well as thinking about how politicians might support culture for its culture's sake, we were really determined that we would use culture as a way of delivering against other policy areas. So whether that be in the areas of health and well-being, education, environment, critically. And so what we then did is create a coalition of organisations who were working in non-arts areas who could see the merit of being part of this programme. Right. So things like putting producers within third sector, voluntary sector organisations. So we have paid for producers who sit within a refugee migrant organisation, within a homelessness organisation, within a refugee, young people risk of exploitation organisation, so that their beneficiaries saw that they had a stake in the success of City of Culture. So I guess we formed a coalition of unlikely partners, really, as well as continue to make the case that we were relevant to multiple policy areas. So therefore, that was a bit easier for us to win that regional and national government conversation about why they should invest, because we were able to point to the impact of arts and culture on other areas. So if arts and culture wasn't their primary focus, we were then saying, actually, by investing in your communities, investing in others, you'll see outcomes which impact the things that do matter to you if arts and culture don't.
So Martin Sutherland, who bought that argument first? There's a little bit like you look at, all the funding that came into the trust. What types of organizations or partners came to the table most quickly and said, I get it. Here's some money, here's some resources, go. I
mean, remarkably early on, it was the local corporate sector who bought the civic pride message really clearly. That actually they loved their city and they wanted to make a difference. The ask was modest. It was a kind of structured membership program, and the ask was fairly modest. And actually, we asked them to pledge their support during the bidding process. And so people took a bit of a punt on whether or not they'd have to cough up, but they did in the end. And so having kind of a good base of business support was helpful. There's now 160 odd businesses who support the City of Culture Trust currently. So they were first in, and then I guess the City Council were in from the beginning. They had pledged a certain level of investment, which then unlocked investment from the combined authority. I mean, remarkably, the central government were slowest in. They don't designate or delegate a funding pot for the winner. So we had to make the case and continue to make the case. But actually, they have unlocked surprisingly large amounts of money over the last couple of years in response to us asking for more. It's because they see, I guess, the relevance to their agenda. So I think business community first, City Council gave them the faith, to the belief that we could deliver against it, and then national government followed, really.
Okay. Martin Reeves, data. There is so much depth and breadth to the impacts of City of Culture. As you, maybe this is a two-part question. As you think about the measurements, your city council was regularly getting data, seeking data, surveying citizens about their take on Coventry, their sense of well-being. Have you seen that change? And then the second question is, from your catbird seat as the chief exec of the city, what outcomes are the most exciting to you as you look today on the city?
Very good questions. You're very good. So the first bit, I would say that around data and the kind of power of what we put in place and why we decided that we would put quite a lot of not just resource, but actually significant power and control around where that data goes to communities so that we could be held to account, was something that for us, and I guess the politicians and other partners, was saying that actually, whilst we understand that individuals certainly living quite challenging lives in Coventry will be inspired, hopefully, definitely by our approach, not just UK City of Culture, but by reimagining their city through their eyes. We kind of intuitively knew that would happen. We also knew, as I said earlier on, to win the ongoing arguments for continued ongoing revenue, capital finance, to bring in not just those local philanthropic organisations that Martin's mentioned, that were just amazing for us, but bring in even bigger commercial organisations that had never maybe invested in Coventry before. We knew we needed to get real about a temperature check that was constantly being made for how people perceived us, how our own residents perceived us, but most of all, the blank canvas that we had which, you know, for people that don't know the UK well, and certainly don't know Coventry and the West Midlands well, people sense that Coventry, as, you know, almost the heart of the industrial revolution in the UK, and a really proud industrial city, and then post-industrial, was seen as bleak and grey. That was never the data, never the qualitative or quantitative view. It was just neutral. It was not knowing. It was a blank canvas. So the ability for us to watch and see what's happened as people's perceptions have changed both inwardly and outwardly was really important to us, along with the economic data, to not exaggerate, to be honest about visitor numbers, to keep a temperature check and a barometer on that. Which then links to your second bit about what have I been proudest of so far. Look, the jury is still out, and Martin's already alluded to this. Too much platitude, too much nonsense being talked about around legacy impact. So we need to wait and try harder and harder about whether the very reason why we wanted this continues to deliver the kind of change according to our model. So the jury's out still. But what I'm really proud of is two things, really. One is the sense of palpable civic pride, identity with our city, both within, but as I said, also out. That is evidence now. It is so much on. The canvas hasn't been beautifully painted on. It's not finished. But if you have a picture in your mind about a blank canvas, people have now been able to proudly put their own images and pictures on their own canvas, right? And that is, I'm really proud of that. A lot more still to do, number one. Number two, without any doubt at all, the engagement, which is why the participation metrics, beyond just, oh yeah, a few people have enjoyed themselves, the fact that we, through Martin's teams, the programming effort, the continued focus on our communities, we now can evidence the fact that people that have never engaged with arts, culture in a deep, meaningful way before have been engaged with, have been included, and now not just passive, they're now actively involving themselves in their communities about the next generation of what they can do to put back through their own cultural identity. Do you know what? I can't put a number on that. Give me a number. Is that worth 200 million, 300 million? I don't know. But for me, the emerging fledgling evidence that that has started to penetrate in ways that even the great UK cities and European capitals maybe have not been able to do in the past, I'm really proud of. And we've probably only just started that.
Yeah, well, in that respect, the pandemic, Martin Sutherland, was an extraordinary challenge. I mean, my God, 2 years of planning and then boom, everything has to change. But there was some, I'm guessing, is this true, blessing in that outdoor felt more, it felt safer, of course, to people. And so neighborhood outdoor locations did somehow, in some weird way, the pandemic enable or force faster, deeper connection at the community level?
Yeah, I think it probably did. I mean, I guess to give context as well, I mean, for those who don't know, the UK State Culture Programme normally runs from January to December in a calendar year, but we delayed the start of our year to May 2021. So actually, we're still in the thick of it. And so those figures that you're reporting are actually really over the first 4 months of our delivery period. So we run right through till the end of May. So there's much more to come. I mean, certainly the pandemic had a practical impact in terms of delaying and uncertainty and the ability for us to get ready and for the city to be ready. But in some way, the model that we had developed was probably the most pandemic proof that we could have, because we weren't actually going to be that reliant on too many major one-off spectacles, which were going to demand hundreds of thousands of people to travel from around the region to come into the city. We were going to have some of those, but what we were absolutely determined to is to make sure that our activities and events happened in faith spaces, in schools, in retail parks, in green spaces, blue spaces, where communities were. And so that we weren't deterred from that. And again, go back to that theory of change model. We stayed focused on delivering against those impacts that we established. And so the pandemic, I guess it underlined probably that our approach was correct in terms of long-term change. But obviously, there's been enormous headaches in terms of the practical delivery, the uncertainty, and the impact on workforce, volunteers, artists, and people's livelihoods, who's been absolutely devastating. And so we're working in that context, but our model was one which was probably more resilient than maybe one which relied on.
As I look,
Jill, if I could just add, it's really important for those that don't understand the UK context maybe as well as others that may be on the call. this what I'm about to say is absolutely true and palpable, and it's in the DNA of Coventry. Because of what happened in terms of it being razed to the ground and most of the medieval core of the city destroyed, and our global, untested really, uncontested global view of being the city of peace and reconciliation, we are known for resilience and the kind of notion of bounce back ability. And yet situations hit us. So actually, whilst none of us clearly wanted this horrendous pandemic, and Martin, the production team, having to deal with what I've said to him, everything short of a plague of locusts, right? We never wanted that because of the death, the destruction, and the sadness it's brought. But if there is one authentic city in a UK context that has the DNA to say that's the cards that have been dealt, as Martin just said, we're now not just going to post-rationalise, we're now going to recreate something which actually is going to be more powerful, more meaningful for the people of Coventry and the UK. It was us. And do you know what? I don't think there's many other UK cities that would say, you're wrong, Martin. Most would say, yeah, you pretty much are the ones that we'd have chosen during a pandemic to do it. And that's not arrogant. That's just the truth of our history, really.
Yeah, I was reflecting on this, just the outdoor component, because the videos and photos I saw, I got to see Coventry, not inside locations, but outside locations. It was quite lovely and high impact. Okay, Stephen's going to join us. As he does, I've got a question for you. Imagine that you are, you leave this gig, both of you, you leave tomorrow, and tomorrow, building on everything that you've learned from this situation, you're in Sydney, in New South Wales in Australia, or Vancouver, British Columbia, or Boston. Where would you, and you said, I want to do this. I don't have a UK City of Culture designation, but I can see the potential in my community. Where would you start?
Well, I would start with a series of very open, very honest, community-led conversations about what people want for their own place, their families and their futures. And that might sound very kind of profound at one level and ethereal, but that's where you start, because without a vision and a compelling notion, which hopefully is shared and enjoyed by a lot, forget whether it's arts, culture, or anything else that leads you then to that point. So that's the first thing you must do. Are you comfortable and happy and content with the livability, the opportunities, the equality of what you see in around you? Normally, in any, even great cities, the answer to that is no. So the next question was, what would you want to see in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Now, they are highly intensive, they are highly resourced, and do you know what? You hear things you don't want to hear, certainly as public authorities and as politicians, but you must start there. What then comes out is a whole series of clear ways in which you can keep that guiding coalition together. It just happens that I believe, and we believe, that arts culture was absolutely the way in which we could bind people to deliver an even more sustainable, equal, prosperous future together. Other cities will have different things, but I would argue that where we are now coming out of the global pandemic, the power of identity, the fact that we have had through no fault of our own, we have physically been ripped apart from each other, and the very thing that binds us is what we're doing now, but face to face, and to share our differences rather than and understand our differences and bind ourselves with a sense of what makes us tick. Those things for cities around the world, whether it's Australia, America, Asia, Africa, for me, I would argue that arts, culture, community programming, development from the grassroots up is going to be a defining characteristic for how we bind people coming through and out of the pandemic and to deliver very livable cities of the future. Yes, listen, at the same time, you need to build an infrastructure, and we've gone over this and glided over it quite rightly, because I could be glib and say whatever happens with our communities, we've got now hundreds of millions of pounds worth of physical legacy that will be with us forever. And it's a damn sight better asset base and space. But you know what? They're just bricks and mortar. They're important and they're exciting. They're just spaces, right? So it's how people decide they want to live with each other in it. And I would urge every single city, place, town, village that wants to think about their future strategies to start with a series of beautiful open conversations. Once you've done that, just remind ourselves of just some of those brilliant vehicles that we can use to deliver that, but be hard-nosed about it as well. It's not fluffy, it's not made of candy floss, right? It's got to be real.
Boy, oh boy. Martin Sutherland, I'm going to I'll ask Stephen to forward the questions, and maybe you'll take the first one. But that was wonderful perspective, Martin Reeves. Thank you, Stephen. What do we have for these two?
Yeah, Martin Sutherland, I think this is a great question for you. Tracy's asked about would you share some salient examples of the previously non-engaged community moving into engagement and commitment? And I wonder if I'd add on that, I know that your approaches to programming partnerships from near and far, right? I wonder if you might talk a little bit about that too in the context of that question.
Yeah, I mean, certainly within the interim report that's been shared, there's evidence in there of, well, I guess what the researchers are saying is that there's evidence that those who are most seldom heard or who've been excluded from these platforms are seeing their place within our programme. And how we've practically done that is not only by putting producers into third sector organisations, but having producers who had geographical ward responsibility for the city. What we didn't have is art form led producers. So we didn't have a theatre producer, dance producer, music producer. What we had is producers who were going to work with people. And so that enabled that people would then meet the producers where they were in their location, in their city. And so we're definitely seeing evidence now of seldom heard communities who've seized these opportunities. I mean, there are formal programs. We have things, a program called Community Connectors, where our community members are paid to open doors. And so they build up some trust in us, and they help build trust about us into these communities as well. But fundamentally, the shift that we really made was investing in people to do what the people want to do. So our co-creation model is at the heart of that. In terms of the other partnerships, we've been quite strict actually about not just adopting existing relationships that the government might have wanted us to have with national partners. We've been very strict not just to work with those who are regularly funded by the national government, and strict about not working with the usual suspects. They had to work on our terms. And so the question back to the Royal Opera House is, well, how do you deliver against these outcomes? What's your long-term commitment to our city? We're actually not that interested in putting an opera on the town square and then you disappearing again. That's not good enough. How are you going to embed in here? So we did turn down major national and international partners to work in our Coventry, because actually, I guess they maybe felt we'd be grateful, but we felt it was a privilege for them to be in our city. And so we had to be quite kind of strict with who we worked with. But those partnerships which have been really successful have really embedded in the city, and we hope that we've influenced practice from national and international players as well, who now value the role of co-creation in their practice as well. So we come from a position of strength about who we wish to work with as well, and not feeling grateful for people who don't want to work in Coventry.
Martin Reeves, I'm going to sandwich two together for you, if that's okay. Did you look at any US or elsewhere outside of UK and Europe cities or projects as potential models when you were preparing your proposal? And then secondly, a question from Doug: how much negotiation had to take place on aligning existing goals and activities of City of Culture with existing civic cultural planning?
Oh, two great questions. I'm not just saying this to capture favour, but I'm a massive fan of post-industrial American cities. So a lot of my own thinking very early on was about the power of what happened with regards to the power of public realm, behaviours, use of public art, for example, in parts of New York. Massive fan of what Detroit did and continues to try to do, because not dissimilar to where Coventry is at, for example. Fascinated by Baltimore for a different set of reasons, because of the power of what they did many years ago around the use of live data and holding people to account, also celebrating across their city what is absolutely the knowledge of the residents. So yes, loads of great examples of the big and the slightly smaller American cities, massively influenced by European cities, and particularly Scandinavian cities, about how they've revolutionized the power of connectivity to public realm, art, public art, the way in which people move around with each other. So yeah, all of that was in our kind of thinking. But I'll say one thing, and if I didn't say it well enough or articulately enough earlier on, the thing I love about places, right, around the world is, guess what? We're all different. And I think there's something also really powerful about the ugly, the beautiful, the in-between bits. You celebrate that and you understand it. And part of our bid was actually really, really quite risky. So it talked about the fact that we're far from the finished product. We're rough around the edges. In fact, we're probably rough in the centre as well. But actually, that's the whole point about why we want to reimagine ourselves. So I spend too much time on calls like this talking to city leaders from around the globe. And unfortunately, the vision is to almost make everyone vanilla with the same infrastructure. And it gets back to my point around it's people and the way in which we interact with each other, as well as our histories, which make us so fascinatingly different. So that's the first bit. And in terms of the second, which you just have to remind me of the second bit of the sandwich, I've got myself overexcited.
Of course. What negotiation had to take place on aligning existing goals and activity with planning?
So I should have said that at the beginning. Really good question from all of us that are boring enough to be sort of people that are in governance positions and strategy positions. What we did, which people conveniently started to forget at various points, the bid and the process for this collaboration was not in isolation. It was an integral, deliberate part of a decade-long cultural strategy for Coventry. It just happened that winning or not, the City of Culture bid was a core pivot point, but we'd have moved on anyway. So the cultural strategy was bought into, wasn't perfect, but it was part of a massive community set of conversations. So we had perfect alignment with a cultural strategy, with our economic strategy, with our housing strategies, with our tourism investment strategies, because actually that's what local government does best. It gives a 10-year, 20-year view, because we'll always be here. So that wasn't difficult, actually. The difficult bit was making people realise it wasn't just popping up as a nice thing to do. It had strategic investment over a long period of time.
Okay, boy, but Martins, hang with me here. I just have a couple of things I want to share with our group before we adjourn, and that is next time we're together, our next TRG 30 on February 23rd, we're going to be announcing a new initiative called TRG Talent Lab. Carrie Misropoff, who is our newly designated Chief Talent Officer, is going to join me to talk about Talent Lab and its purpose as an incubator for dialogue and cultivation of the professional skills and capabilities of the next generation of high impact arts and cultural leaders. Don't miss that session. Send your staff. It promises to be an exciting and high impact one. As always, consider, if you haven't already, joining the now more than 600 organizations globally who have shared data to understand the impact on arts consumption in the context of this pandemic. And as always, TRG is here with and for you to build a thriving next generation arts and cultural industry. Listen, Martin Sutherland, Martin Reeves, thank you so much for joining Stephen and me for an inspiring and practical discussion about the impact that the creative sector can have on a community. As we head out, I've got a cheeky question for you. You knew it was coming. It's Olympic season. What are you gonna give City of Culture? A silver, a gold, a bronze? What's your take so far in this interim period, gentlemen?
Oh gosh. Does the modest Scotsman come to the fore? Probably not. It's a gold medal, of course it is, at a point, but it's about, I would suspect we're looking for kind of multi-event medals here. You know, the city's amazing. It's been amazing, but we want to win a few more is the point. Yeah.
Martin Reeves.
I think I said to you before, Jill, I studied at Loughborough University in the UK, which is known as being, in fact, I think if the latest Summer Olympics, if Loughborough had been university, been a nation, it had come in the top 20 in the Olympics. That's how good it is in sporting terms. So I was there for 8 years. And we used to say, you never win silver, you just lose gold. So we are gold in Coventry, right? And we're aiming to be platinum in how we, but the key bit is the trying, as well as the success and the outcome, is as important, if not more important, than who's on the podium. And I really mean that. And actually, if everyone on this call can just realise the power of people coming together to try and get to that podium, do you know what? If you don't make bronze, silver or gold, genuinely, you're learning a huge amount about yourself and your city and your place in the pursuit of getting there.
Martin Reeves, Martin Sutherland, thank you for joining. Best of luck as you move forward through and to the end of City of Culture, but there is no end. That's the intention. Stephen, thank you always. And thank you all for joining us for TRG 30. We will see you next time and enjoy this mightily. Thank you.